Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7. We're sorry it's a little bit late this evening, but we've had problems getting our guests in through the traffic today. But I'm glad to say that both of our guests this evening have made it in. So let me introduce, first of all, Day Tucker, who is our rural affairs expert. Welcome again, Day, to you.
Thank you very much.
And James Donlan, the MSP for Cathcart. Welcome, James. Thanks for struggling through the traffic to get here.
My apologies for delaying everybody.
It's all right. It's worth the wait. Okay, well, without further ado, let's get on with tonight's news stories. And I think the first one, which really has come up on the radar in a lot of different channels and news sources today, is the British Accident and Emergency Waiting Times. So the hospital waiting times in the rest of the UK outside of Scotland's NHS are at their worst on record as the NHS comes under intense pressure before what doctors and hospital bosses fear will be a very tough winter for the service. Less than 3/4 of people who sought care in E&E units in England in October were treated and then discharged, admitted or transferred within 4 hours, the smallest proportion since the target was introduced in 2004. That is far below the 95% of patients that ministers and NHS chiefs say should be dealt with by A&E staff within 4 hours. Now these figures, these are the last before the general election, and they've shown that 1.3 million people attended hospital A&E in October. 908,000 were seen within 4 hours, but 311,000 approximately were not. So we're looking at 1 in 6 of, shall we say, English or Welsh NHS patients not being seen within 4 hours. What on earth is going on with the British NHS?
Well, if you listen to our opponents at Holyrood, the issue lies in Scotland. It doesn't lie in the rest of the UK. These are dreadful figures, and although they're still treating an awful lot of people, if you're one of those people that have missed their appointments, then that's no consolation at all. Yeah. The NHS down south has been in trouble for some time. Mm-hmm. It's clear that whatever systems they've got in place are not working. They've brought in too much of this commercialisation of the NHS down there, which we've managed to fob off and fight off as much as we possibly can.
James, is this the so-called internal market within the NHS where we have competing bids to provide services?
Yeah, and you know, what happens is that in these internal markets is that there are winners and losers. And what we're seeing is that some of the people that are losing are some of the people that are missing out in these appointments in A&E. The pressure gets placed maybe on the wrong parts of the health service because of financial reasons as opposed to need.
It seems odd, Day, I think, that the politicians have known for decades that the population is going to live longer. Mm-hmm. They've had decades to think about this, and yet they haven't done anything about it. They don't seem to have put any measures in place to increase the amount of NHS services available, particularly to older patients.
And worse than that, you've then got austerity, which is making people ill.
So do you believe that the austerity is actually exacerbating the problem?
I mean, I don't know for a fact, but it's common sense, surely, that when people are suffering the way they are with lack of food and they're having to go to food banks and all the rest of it, that they will add to the pressures on the NHS because they're unhealthy. Their children are being unhealthy as well.
Well, according to the rest of this report, many hospitals are finding it increasingly difficult to respond to a fast-growing need for both urgent and non-urgent care because at least a third of doctors have begun working fewer hours, and fewer shifts, I beg your pardon, as a result of a continuing dispute over their pensions. Now, James, do you know what this is about? Why are the doctors working fewer pensions?
It's been going on for a number of years now. The UK government have changed the way that they work consultants' pensions. I think it is more than.
Is it only consultants?
I'm not completely sure about that, but it's had a real knock-on effect on both the morale of the affected doctors and therefore on the health service. It's just interesting what they were saying about austerity. You're kind of getting a triple whammy here. Yes. You're getting this down south particularly. You're getting the effects of austerity at a time when down south, local authority budgets have been slashed, which means that there's no space for people to leave the hospitals, lots of bed blocking going on, which means that there's no throughput in the accident and emergency. So these three things together are making the figures down south, I think, much worse than they are up here.
So you think there are a number of underlying reasons why the NHS in England appears to be failing? I mean, it's obviously not just the funding, but it's also the planning of the NHS, the structure of its internal markets, and what seems to be the cutting of pension, or not the cutting of pensions, but the altering of contracts is making the doctors decide to work fewer shifts, which must surely create backlogs, particularly in surgery.
Yeah, I would be surprised if that was a major reason. I would think it's the other things. I think that's a player in it, but I think it's the other things that are causing that, because you know, the number of it, and for me, to some extent, since about 1990, from about 2007 onwards, you can kind of understand that there's a tightness in money. You know, money has been tight since the crash around about that time. But there was those years when the Labour government were in power where money was plentiful. And what they should have been doing then is they should have been planning for the future.
Yes.
But what they were doing was they were spending it on personal favourite projects, and I think we're now paying the price for that. But that's not to excuse the Tories and their rush towards austerity.
That's right. Also, if you think about how Scotland some time ago saw that if there was more care in the community, then people wouldn't have to go to hospital.
So you're saying that it's better to bring the care
Nip it
closer
in
to
the
the
bud.
patient before they present themselves at
Yes.
A&E. Instead of doing that, they have another professional that they might be able to see first, or maybe
Yes.
a chemist or a physiotherapist or somebody in a doctor
In
practice.
terms of the community planning, where you get the different agencies coming together in local areas, and they will discuss what's going on, and they'll see if there's a sort of crunch point that they need to tackle, and it'll be flagged up early enough that they can actually put things into place and try and nip it in the bud.
I see. James, you were...
Yeah, I'd like to come in on that point. I agree completely with that point. One of the things that we need to get clear and the public have to understand is that we won't solve this health crisis by relying solely on the health board or even solely on the health service and local authorities. This is a community-wide situation. We need to be able to... Health has to play its part. The local authorities clearly have to play their part, but so do the rest of society.
So you feel maybe that there should be more education as well for people on how to live more healthily, how to look after their health,
and to
or
use,
how to watch out for the danger signs of some impending illness before it becomes a problem.
Yeah, but also not to make your first point of call the hospital.
But to go to
I
the
understand
GP.
I understand why people do that sometimes, because it's easier to go to accident emergency or out of hours than to wait for 4 or 5 days to get an appointment in your local surgery.
Yes.
So there's all these things that have to go together before we can really say that we've got a handle on it. But certainly the figures show quite clearly that here in Scotland, the Scottish Government have got a much stronger health service than either in England or in Wales.
Yes.
Well, according to the statistics, although the British government is throwing money at the health service, the rate at which its spending increases has dropped. In other words, normally we would expect to see health spending increase year on year because it has to cope with the demand. But the rate of increase, particularly the number of doctors per 1,000 people, has slowed dramatically, and the number of nurses per 1,000 people has actually fallen since 2010. So it's clear that it's not the money it's not the amount of money they claim that they're putting in, it's what's actually required to,
and how that money is
fund
spent.
the number of nurses and doctors and other professionals.
Yes.
Now, due to the way that the health spending is distributed across the UK, a budget set in England, and then that sets the budget for the devolved areas as well. Now, how is this apparent underfunding in England affect the funding of our own health service?
Well, it's just clear it does. I mean, the less money that's been spent through the public purse in the health service in England, the less money we're getting through our Barnett consequentials. Now, the Scottish Government have said that any money they get through the Barnett consequentials they will be spending in health. And they're also spending more than that on health. But it's not just money alone.
No.
And you know, you can throw all the money you like at the health service, you won't ever get it perfect because people get sick.
Well, the thing is,
And
it's a
accidents
human
happen.
service, isn't
Exactly.
it? Human beings are not.
But
We're not machines.
at some stage in the future, there will have to be a whole look at the whole holistic way that you deal with.
I don't know about you. I've thought for a little while that the national insurance that we all pay as part of our earnings maybe should actually be split so that we have a national health insurance, which is going to probably always go up a little bit as wages climb.
But you know that national
know-
insurance is just tax.
Yes.
It's just general taxation. It just goes into
But the problem is we don't control it, do we?
Yeah, exactly.
And it used to be,
Exactly.
like road tax, if I remember, road tax used to be ring fenced for use on the roads. Now it goes into the general pot and is lost.
But when you say we don't control it, do you
Well, I
mean we, the public,
Scottish,
the consumer?
Scottish Government
Scottish
doesn't
Government
control national insurance. You do have a small amount of control over direct income tax, but it's tiny, isn't it?
It's tiny,
15% or
yes,
something,
and
isn't it?
you know, it doesn't allow us to change the rates, the bands, the rates and bands together that we need to make sure that we can make a difference.
Okay. I'd like to leave this subject for now and talk now about what's happening in America with Donald Trump's
Could we not
impeachment.
just leave it before you reiterate that Scotland is actually performing really well, despite
I'm glad
all
you
the
made that
nonsense
point.
that they're
Thank you
shouting?
for pulling me up there.
Sorry.
Well, no, you're quite right. Of course, the figures in Scotland are calculated in a different way.
Yes.
And the Scottish targets for A&E are much higher
Yes.
in terms of the target we set. And although most of these targets are almost never met because they're so high, it's an attainment, isn't it? It's a target to aim for
It's
Yeah.
much more admirable, surely, to set yourself an incredibly high target
and try and
and
strive
try
for
and
it.
get it than to set yourself a target that you would expect to meet but still not get it, which is
Yeah.
what's happening down south. Well, I think that what we do is we always meet the target that has been set down south, but we don't meet that particularly hard target that we set ourselves.
Yeah.
And surely the government should be getting praised for trying to
Yes,
reach that,
yes.
as opposed to criticised for doing better than every other part of the UK.
It's been.
Yes.
I mean, I know that the idea of targets in the National Health Service has got a checkered history because trying to meet targets can often lead to professionals taking shortcuts or rushing diagnoses, and mistakes
Yes.
are made, particularly when people are tired and overworked. So obviously, we need more staff to take the pressure off those who are in the front line, who
Oh.
might have to rush things through in order to try and make a target.
Or we
I'm-
need to look at how the health service works and if there's
Yes.
a more efficient way to make it work.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
I
we
know.
do spend an inordinate amount, quite rightly, an inordinate amount of money on the health service.
We do.
You know, almost 50%, I think it is.
But we also live in a United Kingdom that is absolutely obsessed with statistics and targets for schools, for colleges, for universities. Everything that is run by the state has got huge targets set for it, almost unattainable most of the time.
And where are these what drives that is the competition between the political parties. They
Yes.
love targets so that they can say, well, you didn't reach that target.
Yeah, we set you a target and you didn't get to it. It's not our fault.
Yeah.
I guess so. It's another way of shifting the blame onto the victims.
It is, yes.
Yeah, but one group of people that doesn't particularly help in those situations are the people who are meant to be helping.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, be that patients or be a...
Well, the patients basically are ending up becoming sort of political guinea pigs.
Yes.
I was going to say footballs, but it's really the wrong analogy. Guinea pigs, I think, is better.
Yes. It was very telling that I think it was perhaps the head of the BMA, and he appealed to, at the start of the election, he appealed to all politicians to stop using the targets and the NHS during this political time.
Well, we're going to move now.
Sorry.
Thanks for winding up. A very good bit of debate there, thank you. To the Trump impeachment inquiry in the United States. With historic impeachment hearings underway, Democrats and Republicans are hardening their arguments over the actions of President Trump as they set out to win over a deeply polarised American public. Now, Donald Trump has said that he doesn't remember, in inverted commas, a compromising call that he allegedly had with Gordon Sondland, the US ambassador to the EU, which top diplomat Bill Taylor raised at the House impeachment inquiry on Wednesday, saying that a member of his staff had overheard Mr. Trump asking Mr. Sondland about, in inverted commas, the investigation. Now, I'm assuming this is the alleged investigation that he asked Vladimir Zelensky to start into his political rival, Joe Biden and his son. Now, Trump on Wednesday, as I said he didn't recall the July 26th call, and he said, and I'm quoting Donald Trump here, "No, not at all, not even a little bit." It's, I suppose, an old excuse used by politicians when they don't want to face an unpleasant truth, is to say that they can't remember clearly what happened. House investigators, the House investigators heard from Mr. Taylor and the State Department official George Kent yesterday, with both men describing the administration's, in inverted commas, irregular dealings with the Ukraine, as the president's personal lawyer Rudy Giuliani and his allies had pushed for an anti-corruption probe into the domestic political rival Joe Biden by pressing the Ukrainian president to a July phone call to help dig up dirt. The allegation, I think, at the heart of this is that Trump was, perhaps in an unspoken way, withholding vital defence funding for the Ukrainian government until he had persuaded Mr. Zelensky to do his dirty work for him and Joe Biden. I think, there are often allegations of American interests, alleged American interventions in other countries, but this one seems personal, I think, with Donald Trump being personally looking for this favour from Mr. Zelensky, but this overwhelming feeling that he was holding back whatever it was. I think it was $300 million worth of military investment, something like that.
The interesting thing, sorry,
no, on you go.
The obvious thing to say about that is that there's never been such a personal president.
Yeah.
He sees the presidency as being his, and not that he's the president of the United States, but the United States is now part of his belongings. It's just another one of his portfolios, and he believes. I mean, all he's ever done since he came into power is gear up for being in power for another 4 years, and so he's trying to get the dirt on somebody that he thinks is going to be his major challenger. Now, what he's done here is worthy of impeachment. And if we were looking at another country, if this was in Ukraine and Russia before Donald and Vladimir became best buddies, then we would be looking at this being corruption, clear signs of corruption between Russia and the Ukraine. But what's happened is that it's America, so therefore we have half the press saying, don't be ridiculous, and the other half saying...
And Donald Trump alleging that the half that he disagrees with is spreading fake news about him, or it's a witch hunt.
I take it these phone calls are never recorded then?
I believe the phone calls between the presidents are nearly always recorded, I believe.
I think after
they may certainly
Nixon,
be transcribed.
They stopped it. I listened to an American podcast often, politics, and they were talking about that, and they were saying that after Nixon, someone was saying, no, we need to make sure that we tape every call, and it's there to make sure that nobody's up to dirty dealings. But then they were going, hold on a second here, we can't do that. And one of the presidents just further down the line decided that they didn't have to be, except for in certain circumstances.
One of the other central claims in this allegation is that Donald Trump had a conversation with an American diplomat, this man Sondland, but on an unsecured line. He was asking him questions about the investigations, in inverted commas, over a mobile phone which this man Sondland was using in the Ukraine in a public place. So the President of the United States has actually broken their own security protocols, allegedly.
John Le Carre will be horrified by this.
Well, Nancy Pelosi said the alleged actions of Mr. Trump in the Ukraine controversy are more alarming than those of former President Richard Nixon, who resigned over the Watergate scandal, as we all know, because we're old enough to remember that Nixon was trying to cover up a
But
break-in.
that was in the days when people did resign when they did something wrong,
They
and
fell
these
on
days
their
have
swords.
gone.
Yeah. Trump seems to not have the political news.
No.
Although it
to-
doesn't seem to be the thing now.
Yes.
It doesn't seem to be the thing.
According to Ms. Pelosi, the cover-up makes what Nixon did look almost small. The House Speaker said of the President's actions, almost small by comparison to his actions here. Nixon attempted to cover up the fact that 5 men connected to his re-election campaign had broken into the HQ of the Democratic National Committee. The Democrats are accusing the Trump White House of attempting to conceal the details of the president's Ukraine call by unnecessarily placing it in a highly secure server. In other words, where nobody can hear it. So we have evidence, presumably, from that conversation, maybe a recording, which the Trump White House does not want to get out into the public sphere.
I believe that call has been was recorded because they gave a transcript. Well, not a transcript of it. They gave parts of it to the media and possibly to the investigation. So I believe that will be there, and there should be a full transcript of it. And
How
we'll
bizarre
be unlucky to see it.
that you've got these 2 men, these blonde men,
Having a
doing
blonde
a
moment.
similar thing, because we've
Yeah.
got our one sitting on his Russian report
Yes,
and Donald Trump
sitting on his phone
sitting
call.
on his phone. Well, there
Yes,
was a
there's a lot-
lovely
there's a-
tweet. Somebody was tweeting something about, I think it was about Trump, and they used the phrase, a bum something.
What?
And it's when you sit on your phone and you press the buttons
yeah,
and
yeah,
it
Oh, a bum call.
a
they
bum
call it.
call.
Yeah, it's where your
Well-
phone's in your back pocket and you haven't locked the
Yeah,
screen
now
and
you
it
see,
calls somebody by accident.
I've never heard of that.
call,
I
yeah,
mean,
well-
I'm a lady. I don't,
I should think
I
it's
don't hear about
probably a
things
very
like that.
appropriate term, Dave, for what's
Well,
going
it
on
is.
here.
Oh
I
dear.
think.
But I said to the person who tweeted it, "What does that mean?" And 2 or 3 very kind men explained to me what it was in a most polite manner. So I was really impressed.
I
at least they did
think
it
that
politely,
Trump does
Dave.
them a lot around about 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
it must be that.
That's right.
Well, you know, as well as Donald Trump being in trouble, of course, the UK is in trouble now.
Oh dear.
Because the next news item concerns the European Union, which has launched an action against the UK
Yes.
over the fact that the United Kingdom has failed to provide a new commissioner under the terms of the treaty, which we still are working under as a member of the EU. Boris Johnson should have nominated, or well, the British government should have nominated somebody to be a commissioner, and they've not done so. So the EU Commission has said in a statement that it sent a letter of formal notice to the UK authorities, who have until Friday next week to provide their views, in inverted commas. Sending a letter of formal notice is the first step in a lengthy legal procedure that the Commission deems a member state to be in contravention of EU rules. In the final stages of an infringement procedure, the EU Commission can refer such a case to the bloc's highest court, which can in turn impose financial penalties. We could be adding to the Brexit bill if they don't provide a new commissioner. So what is going on? Why is the British government deciding not to bother providing a commissioner? Do they just think, well, there's no point because we're exiting?
No, they're in a huff.
They're in the huff?
You know, I mean, the truth is that Boris has decided that we're leaving, along with his cohorts and his sycophants and the media and the Tory government, and they decided they don't need to behave like adults. You saw that when he lost a vote in the chamber, he said that he wasn't going to play any more part in parliamentary proceedings until recess. You know, that's a quality of character that we have in charge of the UK and in charge of, as you quite rightly say, the US.
Yes.
It's terrifying. How did we get here?
Well, we got here presumably because it was or so we're told, it was all planned by President Putin. And these are just useful idiots.
Yes, and they are certainly that.
Well, with the UK authorities have until November the 22nd to respond, and the EU said the deadline is justified by the fact that the next Commission must enter into office as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So they're holding up European Union business by doing this.
Didn't Cummings threaten that, though?
Yeah,
I think he threatened to do that.
yes.
You think
they don't see
Boris
anything
Johnson
wrong with
had
this.
actually threatened to not provide
To
a
disrupt
commissioner?
the EU.
Well, he did say he would
He
disrupt
did,
it, didn't he? Do you think this is maybe, as you say,
Was
a
that
little bit
Rees-Mogg,
of a
maybe?
fit
Peak.
of pique by the
It
British
is Putin,
government?
That's exactly what it is.
Spiteful.
Yes.
They think they're still in those schools where the nanny comes in and changes them, you know, after class. They are. I've never seen. I never believed, and I'm no fan of Westminster. Right? As far as I'm concerned, it's an institution that's seen itself well past its
Sell-by
sell-by date, and we should be well gone from it. But I have never seen it run by such an incompetent bunch
Yeah.
as I've seen it run over the last few years, but over the last few months in particular.
In particular.
Any government could have people like Rees-Mogg in it. Priti Patel, when we're talking about people breaking rules,
Yeah.
she was found to be guilty of giving secrets to a foreign government, and now
Yeah.
she's in the cabinet.
Yeah, she was involved in actually funneling overseas aid money
That she was
to the
suggesting
Israeli
that to
Defence Force.
exactly.
So
Right.
actually giving money intended for alleviating poverty in other countries
To create poverty in
to
in
the Israeli
Israel,
military.
supposedly. Yeah.
So, and she got off with it as well, which was
She gets
peculiar.
sacked, and now he's
And then
Now she's back.
reinstated.
now he's brought her in.
Anyway, we have a spokesman for the British government said officials have written to the EU to confirm pre-election guidance states the UK should not normally make nominations for international appointments during this period. When did they say this?
Well,
This
Purdah
is news
Purdah
to
is
me.
the excuse, isn't
yes,
it?
yes, it's the excuse for everything. They would probably have said it during this period, but they have known from before this period that this was due, and they refused to do it. And
Yeah.
that is in keeping with the whole childlike
Childlike
attitude
behaviour.
of this
Yes.
government.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I noticed also that Boris Johnson's SPAD, his spin doctor, Dominic Cummings, this is the special advisor, or SPAD as they're known, also seems to have a very churlish and spiteful
Yes.
nature when it comes to deciding how policy should be done. And it seems at least that Cummings is, or his will is being exerted through Boris Johnson as a kind of proxy. Who's actually pulling the strings of Dominic Cummings? Well, I think that's the other big question.
Yes, well,
Anyway, I'd like to leave that sorry bunch out of the conversation for a little while and talk about somebody who I think is a lot more important, and that is Clara Ponseti. Now, the former Catalan education minister, Clara Ponseti, has been released on bail after appearing in court in Edinburgh as the Spanish authorities are seeking her extradition. Ms Ponseti, a professor at St Andrews University, handed herself into police on Thursday as she faces a charge of sedition over her role in Catalonia's unsanctioned independence referendum in 2017. Now, we should have some video of the events taking place in Edinburgh today with Ms Ponseti.
I have a short statement to issue on behalf of Clara Ponseti as her solicitor. This morning, I arranged with Police Scotland for the voluntary attendance of Professor Clara Ponseti. She was formally placed under arrest and the European arrest warrant served on her. Clara was then transferred to the Edinburgh Sheriff Court for appearance at the extradition court before Sheriff Ross. After submissions from our legal team, Clara was released on bail. The next hearing will take place on the 12th of December, and a date for the full hearing is likely to take place in spring 2020. Clara Ponseti faces a single charge of sedition, which relates to the organising of the referendum in her role as the Minister of Education. The warrant is full of contradictions and mistakes. Whilst it accuses Clara of everything, in reality the warrant provides no details of examples of any alleged crime. This warrant comes as no surprise because when the Supreme Court sentenced 9 Catalan leaders to 100 years between them, it wrongly accused the Employment Minister Dolors Bassa of the decisions taken by Clara in her role as Education Minister. Clara submits that she should not be extradited for a show trial in the Supreme Court, where she believes the only verdict would be one of guilt. Clara views these charges as politically motivated prosecution. We will submit that Clara's human rights cannot be guaranteed in the Spanish courts. The warrant signed by Judge Pablo Llerena charges Clara Ponsatí with the crime of sedition. Sedition is the archaic offence invented in the 16th century courts of Europe by kings and queens who feared a backlash from people demanding their freedom. Sadly for Spain, in Scotland, like most democracies, the crime of sedition no longer exists. If there is anyone who should be put on trial, then it is the Spanish state for unleashing an orgy of violence on the Catalan people for its assaults on the right to vote, the right to protest, and on the fundamental human right to self-determination. Sorry. Can we just be quiet? Be quiet.
No, we're not going to do the picture again.
No, we're not, but I just want to hear it. So, continuing. The Spanish authorities have repeatedly abused the European arrest warrant. We are instructed by Clara to robustly defend her from what she describes as judicially motivated revenge. Clara wishes to put on notice all those Spanish politicians who have abused the rule of law that they will also be exposed to scrutiny in her defence. Clara trusts that her fate now lies in the hand of the Scottish justice system, which she believes to be impartial, robust and independent. President Sanchez recently exposed himself to accusations of interference in the extradition process, whilst the leader of the far-right Vox Party believes Scotland should face consequences if Clara Ponsatí is not extradited. Our legal system will not be swayed by such interference or threats and will come to a decision based on the law. Clara believes that the Catalan people are changing the course of their history and that each act of repression by Spain brings the day that Catalonia is free closer. Visca Catalonia, lluitarem fins al final y guanyarem. Thank you.
Well, they're the words of Amar Anwar, the human rights lawyer defending Miss Ponsatí. So what does this mean for Clara? She's obviously extremely angry at being victimised by the Spanish government, I presume, who've issued this warrant for her arrest.
Yeah, well, if she's feeling angry, I'm pleased.
Well, she seems
if
to have
it
come
was
out
me,
swinging.
well, that's brilliant if she has. I mean, what a situation to be in. Horrendous.
It seems appalling that her colleagues can be sentenced to over 10 years
Yes.
for simply organising a ballot
Yeah.
in a supposed European democracy
Yeah.
in the 21st century. And that the Spanish government is prepared to utilise what is effectively a law from the 15th century
Medieval law. Right?
in order to silence the Catalan independence movement by cutting off its head.
Yeah.
It's so draconian. It's so medieval the way the Spanish are going about this. I mean,
Well,
Clara,
they did invent the Inquisition, didn't they?
well, this is on that sort of scale. I think.
I think so.
We're looking at. Actually, listening to the way Clara has worded this, because she's obviously speaking through her lawyer. But she said she wishes to put on notice all those Spanish politicians who've abused the law. She's warning them that she's going to come gunning for them legally for trying this. Clara trusts that her fate now lies in the hands of the Scottish justice system, which she believes to be impartial, robust and independent. If we go back to the trial of the men accused, if you remember, of the Pan Am bombing,
Yep.
Scottish
Yes.
law was applied there,
Yeah.
but it was applied there in Holland in a completely different jurisdiction.
Right.
I can see a potential use of Scots law in this case, since we have no sedition
No.
offence. And therefore, Scotland's judiciary could say, we don't recognise this offence and you can't accuse her of it. And she's
we
also...
can't speak for Scots law.
Well, no, we can't,
right,
but...
You know, I mean, we have to see... Amar sounded very confident there when he was speaking on behalf of Clara.
think
and
he is.
And I'm delighted to see that, and the point he made about there not being a law such as suggestion. I don't think... I could be completely wrong in this, and it wouldn't surprise me, but I don't think you can extradite somebody for a crime that you don't recognise in this country.
That was my assumption. Okay, it's my own assumption, and this is not fact.
Yeah, but I'm pretty confident that's the case. So unless there's other things in there, then you would hope that she's got a strong case. And Amar's certainly the man to pay.
Yes.
If you look at the words which Amar actually used, he said, and I quote here, "We will be fighting this on the basis of Clara's human rights being abused." So they're going to invoke the EU's Human Rights Act because Clara is going to a kangaroo court where she believes she's not going to get justice. She doesn't trust the justice system, and her human rights will be abused if she's returned back to Spain. So I think this obviously is the line which the line which Amar Anwar is taking in her defence.
Yeah, it's certainly hard to argue with the fact that her human rights are going to be abused if she goes back to Spain when we see what's happened to her colleagues. You know, that was not a legitimate court case. That was, as has been described, a kangaroo court where the decisions had already been made. You get the impression prior to the trial taking place.
There's also a question over whether Carla Ponseti was even involved in the organising of the ballot. According to her background information, Professor Ponseti served in the Catalan administration when it organised the 2017 referendum. She was, of course, the education minister at the time. 9 of her 12 political comrades or colleagues involved in the referendum were last month given stiff prison sentences by Spain's Supreme Court, which we know about. And Carlos Puigdemont, the exiled president of the Catalan region, is still in, was it Belgium, I believe? But the Belgian government has refused to extradite him.
Right.
For very similar reasons, I believe. They don't recognise the charge, and
I think that's right.
his human rights are going to be violated. It looks as if most of the countries where I'm just hearing that the Belgian government they don't extradite people. It's not part of their normal.
Okay.
Germany, I beg your pardon, refused to extradite him. I think that in 2018, and they said that. I believe that the German judiciary decided that the charges weren't even appropriate to Puigdemont. A lot of the things that they were accusing him of were ridiculous, and I think they basically threw it out. Now, I mean, you as a woman of some learning, you must feel, some kinship with Carla here. She is on her own in Scotland. I mean, she's far away from family and friends in Catalonia. She's in exile.
Well, yes, you say she is, but look at the support that she's getting.
Indeed.
You know, and I'm proud that we are giving her that support. Not just Amar Anwar, but I mean, you could probably hear the crowd in
hundreds
the
of people
background.
outside,
Yes,
I believe during
because we know what's right and we know what's wrong, and this is wrong.
Well, I mean, the only violence that ensued during this referendum came from the Spanish police.
Yes.
And I would say they were more paramilitary than police.
Yes.
In fact, if I remember correctly, there were dozens of armoured police cars,
They have a specific force that is paramilitary police
like
mixed.
the civil guard type.
And they were brought from other parts of Spain.
Yeah.
People who had no connections with Catalonia were obviously used in that. And we all saw the pictures of people being dragged by their hair out of polling stations, being kicked and beaten.
Yeah.
One woman who I remember being struck in the face with a baton.
That's right.
Yes.
Had a huge gash in her head.
Yes.
And she proudly went up and voted anyway.
Yep.
I remember that to this day. That was one of the lasting images in my mind.
Yes.
Anyway, the Spanish judge's decision to drop the case against Puigdemont came after the German court ruled in 2018 that the former Catalan regional president Puigdemont could not be sent back to Spain for rebellion, only to face charges of embezzlement potentially, if in the case of alleged misuse of public
Of course,
funds.
that was the money that was spent having the referendum.
Indeed, I
was
think
a
that would be probably the
misuse of
only
public funds,
thing
yes.
that he might be prosecuted for.
Yes, yes, yes.
But the misuse of the funds is not on the warrant for Carla Ponseti. It is just the sedition. I think they've actually. I'm hearing just that it's the closest thing you can get to treason in this country.
Yes, sedition.
The Crown Office, I gather, are planning to sort of respond to it in these terms. Anyway, I'd like to leave this subject now and talk about something else which came up just recently, and that is the announcement by the Scottish Greens today that they're planning to field 22 candidates in the upcoming election. Now, the Scottish Greens have announced that the party will contest 22 seats in the general election. The list of candidates, according to their report, is gender balanced, which you would expect, I suppose, from a modern progressive party like the Greens. And they will contest seats held by SNP, Labour, Conservative and Lib Dem. So they're not, according to their press briefing, being selective here. They don't seem to be looking for any kind of pacts in this. However, the Scottish Green co-leader, Lorna Slater, has said, "I'm delighted that our local branches have decided to contest seats across Scotland and against every party who lack a clear plan to tackle the climate emergency." So the Greens are attempting at the moment to leapfrog the whole idea of independence and Brexit and go straight to their favourite subject, which is, of course, the climate emergency. Now,
Bizarre.
Yes.
the thing is
I
that
just don't understand why they think that if they jeopardise the votes for independence, that they will get what they want with either the Labour or the Conservative government.
I think-
Surely, if we're independent, we can then do far more in terms of climate mitigation.
my own opinion, and I'm not
No.
supposed to hold an opinion,
We won't
but
tell
I
anybody.
think the way I look at this with the Green strategy is they're aiming for the younger voter, because younger voters have been watching the teenage activist Greta Thunberg giving speeches all over the world, sailing across the Atlantic, and basically trying to convince adults to turn things around with the climate. I think perhaps that the Greens are targeting the younger voters with this.
Let me ask you something then, Gordon. Just on the back of what Day said. See if the Greens do target younger voters, are successful in targeting younger voters
Yep.
in this election, which party is that going to affect most?
Well, of course.
It's going to affect the SNP most.
Yeah.
And then what we're going to do is, we might lose some seats that we would have won otherwise. We'll then find that the message for that second independence referendum is not as strong as it would have been otherwise.
Yeah, it gets
And then we
diluted.
might not get it. And it will be partly down to the Greens.
Yeah.
Because the truth is that the Greens are a... Climate change is their reason to exist.
That's one of them.
And that's great. That's extremely important. But the fact is, to say that other parties aren't doing anything, when the Scottish Government have just put forward the most progressive bill to tackle climate change, I think, in the world, and the Greens never voted for it.
Yes.
So the Greens can be as hypocritical as any other political party when it comes to trying to make a noise, not trying to stick by
Yeah.
the principles that they say that they fervently believe in, but to try and make a noise just to show themselves as being different from the
I
SNP.
believe so. Day, do you have an opinion on the Greens on this?
Yes,
announcement?
well, I absolutely agree with that assessment. The one thing that I found, again, bizarre is their attitude about the Scottish Government's decision to on fracking. Now, the Scottish Government knew that if they banned it, they could be sued.
They would be taken to court.
They'd
and
be
the
taken to
thing
court.
Could be undone.
So, so by doing what they did, and yet the Greens were saying, "Oh, you can't do it. There's something. You must ban it. You must ban
because
it."
it was a rolling kind of embargo on anything happening with fracking, unless they could prove it was safe.
Yes.
And of course, the SNP and everybody else knew that fracking's never been proved to be safe and
reality is
can't
we
be, and
believe it's safe,
obviously
and with the
Quadrilla
laws,
couldn't really move on
Yes,
that.
and particularly unsafe right across that central belt, which used to be, and
Full of
probably
coal
has still
mines.
masses
Yeah,
of coal
exactly.
mine
Yeah, my
subsidence
constituency in
under.
Glasgow still has
Yeah.
still has mines there.
One last clue as to who they're aiming at here, and that is their youngest candidate that they're putting up is a young man called Cameron Glasgow. It's a wonderful name, who's standing in Livingston, and he's just turned 19. So he's actually going, if he got elected, would be even younger than Ross Greer, who, as you know, is a Green MSP
Yes,
at Holyrood.
yes.
Anyway, I think we'll leave the Greens for the moment, I think.
I'm always happy to do that.
And the weird thing is that the next story also involves the Greens, as far as I can see, as well. So we have the Scottish Government must take action. Oh no, I beg your pardon. Yeah, must take action to prevent Tory humanitarian crisis. Now, this refers to the locking out of 150 failed asylum seekers in Glasgow, where Serco, the private company engaged by the British government to manage the properties and the movements of these asylum seekers while their claims are being processed. Serco had been attempting to get permission to change the locks while these people were out, so that they couldn't get back into their homes and wound up on the streets. So here we are. We have a new situation generated by, again, the British government with its immigration policy, for want of a better word. I think, Dave, let me ask you first about this. What do you think of this? What on earth is going on here? Why has it got to the point where a private company is evicting, well, basically, and the Greens are condemning the SNP for allowing this to happen. So we've got the Greens blaming the SNP for a UK government problem which can't be solved by Serco, who've now lost the contract. I mean, it's a mess.
Yes.
I think the contract is now going to another company, or it will be.
Yeah, another private company.
I wonder if the Greens are just they're platforming themselves,
I think they're grandstanding.
and perhaps people aren't understanding what the real issues are.
They seem to be sniping a lot
They
at
are.
the SNP, but similarly to the Tories and Labour, attacking on things which are not devolved.
That's
These
right.
are powers which are reserved, yes?
Yes. I mean, maybe you didn't give them enough at the last budget.
No, not according to your opponents. According to your opponents, we
gave
are
them too
a
much.
sort of Green-run government, and the Greens are our puppets. So it's kind of like both ways.
Yeah.
But the truth is that they're playing politics.
Yeah.
Patrick Harvey mentioned it today at FMQs, and to be fair, he didn't really accuse us, but he did say that the Scottish Government have got to do everything they can. It's all right talking about what's going to happen down the line, but you've got to do everything you can. First Minister made it quite clear that we will do everything that we can, but this is an issue where legally our hands may well be tied.
Well, I mean, it's clear here because the First Minister has actually answered this question
exactly.
that Patrick Harvey put, and she had said that her government would be taking action to prevent the imminent humanitarian crisis. So she has actually answered this question.
No, what she said was, I think, correct me if I'm wrong,
Patrick
that
Harvey has
take
said
every step that she possibly can, something along
Yeah,
those lines.
Patrick Harvey has said in
Everything
his
available.
speech that I urge them to put support in place without delay to ensure those most in need are afforded the support they require. But how can this be done?
But in practical
this is-
terms,
when
what
this-
is he wanting the Scottish Government to do?
Well, I have no idea because they don't have power over this, do they?
Well, it depends on what the legal judgment was, right? For example,
They have the right
it's
to
one-
do it. Is it the High Court?
Yeah,
ruled?
yeah. But what I mean is that if one of my colleagues says to me today that if, for example, we can't give them because of the immigration and asylum rules that we can't give them support, financial support, then it's very difficult for the Scottish Government to undercut that by giving, by doing something that might be seen
Would you
to
be
giving them
allowed
legal
to
support.
give them tents, for instance?
No. I don't
When-
know
when-
what you can do.
A few weeks ago on this programme, we actually discussed policies being put in place by the Scottish Government, by the SNP, on the issue of homelessness, where they were going to join up the system so that anybody who is on the brink of becoming homeless would get support.
Yeah.
But we're not, the Scottish Government is not allowed to provide accommodation, and the local authorities are not allowed to provide accommodation to failed asylum
That's
seekers.
right. That's right.
Right.
The question in my mind is, what does the British Government expect the asylum seekers to do? They're just basically out on the street in the middle of winter.
Waste away and die. What they really want them to do is say, okay, we give up,
We'll
send
go
us
home.
home. That's what they want to do. That's why they're doing this. But of course, some of these people might be going home. The British Government will clearly disagree, but they might be going home
To
prison,
danger.
to torture, to death. And that's the kind of British government that we have.
So
and have had for
I
some
always
time.
thought, perhaps erroneously, that the immigration service in the United Kingdom could actually come and arrest people and deport them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just simply pack them on. And they did do this
I've done
a
it, yeah,
while ago.
yeah.
They packed hundreds of people onto a plane and flew them off to goodness knows where. What my question was when I read this story was, why is this not happening? If these people are failed asylum seekers and their cases have failed, they must have arrangements
They're
surely
out
to...
there. They're out there. They'll be out in society now.
You think
That's-
that maybe
I mean,
they
that-
may be just going to
They'll-
leg it
they'll be
now
on,
into
they'll be
the...
on the street, they'll be living with friends, they'll be trying to get some job in the black economy. That's how they'll be living their lives now until such times as, who knows?
What I'm trying to get to the root of here is if this is only... If it's only failed asylum seekers. Okay, what I'm hearing is that many of the people who have been subjected to these lockouts have appealed the result of their asylum
Yeah,
decisions,
yeah.
or are in the process of it, and they are still being subjected to this new permission, basically, that Serco can go in and change the locks while these people are out, leaving them
Money
homeless.
is clearly much more important than human dignity and life to the immigration service or home office.
You would think that by doing something like that, the British government or their agents, the agents of the UK government and Serco are actually committing a crime, because they're forcing a family or people out onto the street to do what? To freeze to death?
Nah,
You
the people who make the laws can't be breaking the laws that they've made. If you know what I mean, that's partly what's wrong here is that when they gave up when they lost their asylum rights, they almost become non-people in the eyes of the law, and that's just disgusting.
I think this is just the result of the British policy of creating a hostile environment.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to move on now to Fife Council, and the co-leader among 4 shortlisted for awards. Now, this is a Scotland Good story for a change.
Good.
Where 5 councillors have been shortlisted for an award. It's not often you hear of councillors being shortlisted for anything. The story is here that SNP councillor David Alexander, who's the co-leader of Fife administration, joins fellow nationalist councillors Faye Sinclair, Ross Vetriano, David Barrett, who have all been shortlisted for the Local Government Information Unit Scotland Councillor Awards.
Wow.
And a group of SNP councillors having a big success there. Miss Sinclair is nominated for Education Champion category, Mr Vetriano for Environmental Impact, Mr Barrett is shortlisted on the New Councillor of the Year category. So clearly,
Good.
Something going on in Fife.
Fife Council have quite a bit of talent at their disposal there.
Yeah. So they're not a team as such. These are individuals who.
Yeah, sounds like it, doesn't
Wow.
it? Aye, I thought it was going to be 4 members of.
Yeah.
I mean, I've known David Alexander for some time. He's a very,
Right.
very impressive councillor and council leader.
Okay, I'm just hearing that we now have a list of the SNP candidates, I believe. and this is an extensive list that I've just been handed here by James. For every seat in Scotland, I would assume, James.
Yeah,
yes.
the deadline was today.
Right.
Can I ask you, James, if you can, highlight any names on this list that you think are particularly important to the SNP's campaign here?
Well, there's a couple. One that I really hope to see back is our good friend Anne McLaughlin for two reasons. One is that Anne, on her own right, will prove that she's a great constituency MP. She'll make a difference down in Westminster. More importantly, she'll make a difference for her constituents in that brief period of time that we're still going to be at Westminster. But also the other side of that is she will be defeating in the process Paul Sweeney, who seems to think that his role as the North East's MP is to self-promote. Anne is the exact opposite. She'll promote her constituents. But there's others. It'd be nice to see Kirsten Oswald. I intend to spend a lot of time working in Kirsten's. It's a neighbouring constituency.
Can I ask you, this is a rather personal choice of my own, about Amy Callaghan, who's actually standing in my own constituency in Eastern Bartonshire. Now, she's standing directly against Joe Swinson.
Yeah, we've said that my intention is to go out there once or twice as well and try and help her. But it's easier to help in neighbouring constituencies, obviously, and Kirsten Oswald has got a fight to take the seat off that.
Take the fight.
McNamee or whatever the Tory, the Tory in East Renfrewshire is. So yeah, there are a couple of people I'd like to go back, but yeah, Amy Callaghan, by all accounts, was very impressive, and it would be great to see her beating the candidate for Eastern Barton, who stays in England. So it would be really, really nice to see her knock Joe Swinson out of there, because she doesn't deserve to be there, and I'm sure that Amy would work hard for the constituents.
The ward of Edinburgh West, is it Sarah Mackin? Is that
Masson?
Masson, I beg your pardon. She seems to have quite an important role there as well. We're looking at a key battleground.
Yeah, I know Sarah from the Parliament, and she's a very hard worker. She's got a great personality. If she won't lose through lack of effort and through lack of ability. So I have got high hopes there that she'll take that seat.
Okay. And the majority in that seat, was it large? Was it?
I really don't
know.
I don't know. Edinburgh is almost like a different country to me. I'm from Glasgow.
Okay. Well, listen, because we're running so late, we're going to just move to the last story this evening. Often when you hear the name of a place, it's associated with some disaster. You think, oh no, what now? And when I read this story at first, I thought the exact same thing, what now? This is a story about the Clutha Bar. And as you'll remember, the Clutha was subject to the helicopter crash a few years ago. Was it 2016, I believe? Just before Christmas. Anyway, the Clutha Bar is to open its door to Glasgow's homeless, to the vulnerable and the lonely, and anybody basically on Christmas Day. The event is being run by a local group called Lights on G1, which believes that no one should be alone during the festive season. The event is in its second year, having previously gathered at a venue in the Gorbals last year. It's thought around 70 people will descend upon the pub for a 3-course meal, entertainment and company. Sounds like a good time, actually.
Yes.
The organiser for Lights on G1, who interestingly asked not to be named because it's a team effort, just a little bit shy of the publicity. It's just rather charming, I think, these days, in anybody. Told the Evening Times when they were interviewing that the support for the event had been amazing. He said, we want to highlight the homeless, lonely and vulnerable people, some of whom can be left with nothing on Christmas Day. It's hard to imagine spending Christmas Day on the street with nothing. So we put on this event so that people can come, relax, have some food, and we even provide them with presents. So...
another
what do you think?
Good Scottish story.
It is so nice,
Warm
isn't it,
hearts.
to hear somebody, especially a place which had such a hard time.
Difficult connotations round about it.
Yeah.
It's typical, I think, of a couple of things, but one of them is it's a nice story for a couple of reasons. One is that the Clutha Bar and the connotations, but also the Clutha Bar has also the reputation for that sort of welcoming
Inclusion.
right? So to have this in Christmas Day is lovely, but also the wee bit about the organiser saying, "Don't name me,"
Yes,
is just in keeping with this as well. You know, I really like that. I mean, there's a lot of us will try and do things for people, organise toy collections and selection box collections and that, but this is a really nice story. It's lovely for the people that are involved, and it's really good for the Clutha Bar to be instantly recognised for a positive reason again.
It's unusual, isn't it, for a pub to be doing something this, on this scale for everybody in the city without a home. It's remarkable.
I don't know that it is.
Is it there might be other events. I mean, obviously this is the second year that they've run
Yes,
this.
I mean, it's
the
obviously-
Salvation Army has traditionally done this in the past, I know.
No, I've seen other places do that.
Yeah.
But not to take anything away from the Clutha Bar, because I think it's wonderful what they're doing.
Well, according to this, the group also plans to walk the streets of Glasgow on Christmas Day. I mean, that's taking time out of your Christmas to actually let homeless people know about the event and make sure that they can attend.
Right,
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're not even just going to sort of let word of mouth get out. They're going to go out and actually
Yeah.
seek people to
Yeah.
help. So, a nice, heartwarming story to
Very.
finish on, I think. And speaking of finishing, I now have to wind the show up and say thank you to my guests this evening, to Day Tucker and to James Dolan. Thank you both for being guests on a rather late programme this evening. And as usual, at the end of the show, it's my tradition to let you know that making television programmes is expensive. And to allow us to continue making programmes for you and to pay the bills at the studio, we need the support of more people to sign up as Broadcasting Scotland supporters. So if you feel like chipping in £5 a month to help us produce more programming, details of how to do that appear on your screens right now. But from all of us here at Broadcasting Scotland, and from a slightly late and haggard seeming Scotland at 7 crew, thank you very much. We'll see you again next week. Good night.